Ever think about how some of the most head-scratching solutions are right under our noses? We're talking about those DIY projects that make you wonder, how did anyone ever think of that?
Exactly. Sometimes the most unexpected combinations can lead to some surprisingly effective results.
And that's what we're diving into today. We've got our hands on a how-to guide that's been making the rounds online, and it's all about creating a super strong glue using just two ingredients. You ready for this?
Lay it on me, I'm intrigued.
Gasoline and dot styrofoam.
Whoa, really? Like the stuff that comes in packaging.
The one and the same. Apparently you can mix these two together and boom, you've got yourself a powerful adhesive. It's pretty mind-blowing, right?
That's a wild combo. I'd never have thought of that. So how does it actually work? What does the guide say?
Well, they lay it out pretty clearly. You start with some gasoline in a container, making sure you're in a well-ventilated area, of course, safety first. And then you slowly add in pieces of polystyrene. The polystyrene actually dissolves into the gasoline.
So it's not like a typical mixing situation. It sounds more like a chemical reaction.
It totally does. It made me think about all those warnings about not letting gasoline get on certain materials. I guess this is what happens.
Right. And it makes you wonder, what is it about the chemical makeup of these two that creates such a strong bond?
Exactly. And that's something I think we should circle back to because the guide actually claims this DIY glue can be used on all sorts of materials. We're talking metal, plastic, wood. They even mention using it to fix shoes.
Wow, that's a bold claim. If it's strong enough for shoes, it must be pretty powerful stuff.
Right. I mean, think about the stress a shoe goes through. Walking, running, all kinds of weather conditions. It makes you wonder how this glue holds up over time.
It does make you wonder. And that makes me think about the durability aspect. If it's that strong, it also might be tricky to remove if you need to make adjustments or if the repair doesn't hold.
True. There are definitely a lot of variables to consider. But there's another angle to this whole thing that I find really interesting, and that's the recycling aspect.
Oh, for sure. We're talking about two materials that are pretty notorious for ending up in landfills. Polystyrene especially. It seems like it's everywhere.
And it's not exactly easy to recycle traditionally. I mean, I always try to do my part, but sorting through those plastics can get confusing, and it seems like there's always a debate about what can be recycled and what can't.
It's a huge problem. Polystyrene takes forever to break down, if it even does at all, which is why finding new and practical uses for it is so crucial.
This DIY glue, if it truly is as strong and versatile as the guide claims, could be a game changer when it comes to reducing polystyrene waste.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder what other solutions might be out there. It's all about looking at things from a different perspective.
Speaking of looking at things differently, the guide mentions a 12-hour drying time. It makes you wonder, is that typical for strong adhesives?
It can definitely vary depending on the adhesive and the environment, but in general, the stronger the adhesive, the longer the drying time, or rather the curing time. People often confuse those two.
That's a really good point. What's the difference exactly?
Well, drying usually just refers to a solvent, like water evaporating from the adhesive. Curing, on the other hand, involves a chemical reaction within the adhesive that forms a stronger, more permanent bond.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about the gasoline drying, but rather a chemical change happening.
Exactly. And that chemical change takes time, hence the 12 hours. That's likely crucial for this glue to achieve its maximum strength.
That makes sense, especially if we're talking about using it on something like a shoe that's constantly under stress. But it does make you wonder about the long-term durability. The guide mentions letting it dry for 12 hours, but is that enough to withstand constant wear and tear?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's a big difference between something holding together in a controlled environment versus out in the real world.
And this is where things get interesting, because we're talking about factors beyond just the adhesive itself. We need to think about the materials being bonded, the environment, and all sorts of other variables.
Absolutely. Things like water resistance, temperature fluctuations, and exposure to UV rays can all play a role in how well a glue holds up over time.
So while this DIY glue recipe is super cool and has the potential to be a great way to repurpose polystyrene, we have to acknowledge that there are still a lot of unanswered questions.
Definitely. This guide provides a fascinating starting point, but I think it's important to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism and a thirst for further research. It would be really interesting to see some long-term studies on the durability and safety of this glue.
I agree. And maybe it'll even inspire some people to experiment with other unusual material combinations and see what other unexpected solutions they can cook up. It really makes you realize that the world is full of possibilities if we just know where to look. That wraps up another deep dive for us. If you're interested in learning more about the fascinating world of material science and unexpected solutions, be sure to check out our show notes for links and additional resources. And remember, curiosity is key.